Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is McGlynn. First up, our Ukraine update on day 527 of the Russian invasion. Ukraine's security service and navy claim to have used an unnamed boat known as a sea drone to scupper the 112-metre-long Olenogorsky Gornyak landing ship in Russia's Black Sea port of Novorossiysk, as onboard camera footage emerged of an apparent twilight attack, which officials in Kiev said was sufficiently damaged to have been put out of combat action. The claim came as images emerged of both a Russian warship tilting to its side and then footage from the head of the marine drone of it apparently moving stealthily across the Black Sea towards the ship and then striking it at its centre. Russian Defence Minister Sergei Shoigu has visited a combat zone in Ukraine to inspect a command post and meet senior military officers, the army said on Friday. Russian news media is reporting the Kremlin as saying it does not believe a US promise that Washington will help ensure Moscow can freely export food if it returns to the Black Sea grain deal. The UK Ministry of Defence has suggested that Russia has begun striking at Ukraine's Danube port of Izmail with a one-way attack unscrewed aerial vehicles, because it has evolved its risk for appetite of conducting strikes near NATO territory. There is a realistic possibility that Russia is using OWA UAVs to strike this area in the belief they are less likely to risk escalation than cruise missiles. Iran's foreign minister Amir Abdollahian will visit Japan on Sunday and meet his Japanese counterpart and Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. There have been positive signals about some kind of participation from China in this weekend's Ukraine Peace Summit in Saudi Arabia, a German government official has said. Poland has detained another suspected member of a Russian spy network, bringing the total number of people detained as part of an investigation to 16. African leaders involved in peace talks over Ukraine have called for the unlocking of Russian grain and fertilizer exports to revive the Black Sea grain deal, South Africa said on Thursday. Ukraine and the United States started talks on Thursday aimed at providing security guarantees for Ukraine. The EU on Thursday banned drone sales to Belarus and added prominent state TV presenters to its sanction list over Russia's invasion of Ukraine and Minsk's crackdown on opposition. Polish and Lithuanian leaders held an urgent meeting on Thursday in a strategically sensitive area where their NATO nations border Belarus and the Russian territory of Kaliningrad, warning that they are bracing for provocations from Moscow and Minsk in the area. More private and third sector providers should be used by the NHS in England to help cut post-COVID waiting lists, Steve Barclay, the English Health Secretary, will say after a review of capacity in the health service, which could see the biggest expansion of private healthcare since the Blair Labour government. Barclay will draw on the work of his Elective Recovery Task Force, a group convened by ministers to look at how to bring down waiting times. The group is chaired by Will Quince, a health minister, along with health policy advisors, NHS England officials, a patient group representative, and 4 private healthcare executives. Announcing 8 more private sector community diagnostic centres, Barclay said he believed the NHS must use every available resource to deliver life-saving checks to ease pressure. There are about 114 NHS diagnostic centres, with those run by private providers due to increase from 4 to 12. 5 of the new centres in the southwest from Cornwall to Bristol will be run by a company called InHealth, founded by British entrepreneur Ivan Bradbury. Barclay's view on the report was released 12 hours before the document itself was due to be published by the Department of Health and Social Care, which the UK government said would be a plan to maximise independent sector capacity to treat NHS patients more quickly. The UK government said its recommended measures would include better use of data to help the NHS identify potential opportunities for the independent sector to support patient care, and expanding training opportunities for staff. The report also recommends increasing the use of private and third sectors in training junior NHS England staff. Stella Vigg, the NHS England Clinical Director for Elective Care, said the NHS in England had already increased use of the independent sector by more than a third since April 2021. The NHS spent about £12 billion on commissioning services from the private sector in 2020 to 2021, which is about 7% of the budget. New analysis reveals the areas of Scotland worst hit by the bedroom tax. The analysis, conducted by the SNP using the latest data available from the UK Government Department for Work and Pensions, reveals Glasgow as the worst hit local authority in Scotland, with 8,014 households having their housing benefit cut due to the policy as of February 2023. It is followed by North Lanarkshire, with 3,199 households hit, Edinburgh with 2,809 households hit, Fife with 2,721 households hit, and South Lanarkshire with 2,338 households hit. For households in receipt of universal credit, Linlithgow and East Falkirk have been the worst hit local constituency in Scotland, with 1,742 households having their benefits cut as of September 2022. It is followed by Kilmarnock and Loudoun with 1,723 households hit, Glasgow North East with 1,703 households hit, Western Bartonshire with 1,685 households hit, and Motherwell and Wishaw with 1,657 households hit. Commenting, the SNP's housing spokesperson, Chris Stevens, MP, said, "The Tories and Labour are pushing families into poverty and costing Scotland millions of pounds by continuing to impose the bedroom tax against Scotland's will. This is yet another broken promise from the pro-Brexit Labour Party, who are becoming indistinguishable from the Tories." In contrast, the SNP Scottish Government has spent millions of pounds protecting families by mitigating policies like the bedroom tax, all with one hand tied behind our back. With the full powers of independence, we could make policies like the bedroom tax a thing of the past. The number of outsourced UK government services that are failing to meet standards has risen sharply, with concerns raised about schemes to support asylum seekers and educate young offenders. A register compiled by Whitehall officials keeps track of each contract tendered, along with its key performance indicators, to judge whether it is being delivered well, and a rating good, approaching target, requires improvement, and inadequate. In what critics said was evidence of UK government ministers failing to deliver high-quality public services, the number of contractors providing work judged to be inadequate or requires improvement jumped from 119 to 207 in just a year, a 73% rise. That means 6.5% of all the targets set for government contracts were being missed, though service providers often blamed external factors. The figures relate to the first quarter of 2023 and are a sharp jump when compared with the same period last year, which saw the proportion of jobs judged to be inadequate or requiring improvement stand at 4.81%. Across Whitehall, the UK Ministry of Justice saw the highest number of concerns raised. A job to provide prison food, given to Bidfood UK, was listed as requires improvement. Bidfood was said to have not fully satisfied the requirement to ensure availability of food and fulfilment of orders. Further concerns were raised over contracts to provide education schemes to those detained in 3 young offenders institutes. Several contracts handed out by the Home Office for firms to support asylum seekers were called inadequate. Issues were identified with call waiting times for people using an advice helpline run by the charity Migrant Help, and Serco Limited's contract to provide asylum accommodation and support services. The delivery of a scheme designed to help disabled people into work, known as Intensive Personalised Employment Support, was also deemed inadequate. Transparency campaigners have called for think tanks to be more open about their funding sources, after it emerged that some of Britain's most influential ones received more than $1 million, or £787,000, from donations in the US in 2021. They include the Institute of Economic Affairs, regarded as an inspiration for policies adopted by the Liz Truss government, and Policy Exchange, a conservative think tank used as a platform by ministers to trail new measures which recently incubated hardline immigration plans. Steve Goodrich, head of research and investigations at Transparency International UK, said ensuring transparency around who funds our politics is essential for public confidence in how our democracy works. Policy Exchange, where Truss was head of economic and social policy before entering politics, received almost $100,000 from a foundation controlled by Leonard Blavatnik, who has a joint US-UK citizenship and was listed this year by the Sunday Times Rich List as Britain's third richest man. The organisation's American arm received $34,786 in 2021 from the Blavatnik family foundation in 2020, which is run by Blavatnik's brother, Alex, to support and advance the programme of policy exchange between the UK and US. It also took more than $270,000 from the family foundation of Yuan Huao, a hedge fund magnate with US citizenship who has donated more than £1 million to the Tories, including £200,000 shortly before the 2019 general election. The IEA's US wing, American Friends of the Institute of Economic Affairs, has accepted $118,000 since 2020 from the Sarah Sky Foundation, a private foundation set up by the billionaire libertarian heir to an oil and banking dynasty. The IEA is believed to have inspired many of the free market policies pursued by Truss and the then Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng. Some of her staff worked at the IEA, and she founded its political wing freer. Truss spoke at more of its events than any other politician over the past 12 years, according to the head of the IEA. The figures on US funding were identified by the investigative journalist Peter Goagan, who analysed his recently published US tax documents. Tom Brake, the director of Unlock Democracy, a pressure group campaigning for greater transparency from think tanks, said the figures underlined the urgent need to break the secrecy that surrounds the funding of many of the UK's think tanks. Policy Exchange and the IEA have long faced questions about their refusal to name their donors. They argue that they might respect their backers' right to privacy unless the backers wish otherwise. Critics say the lack of transparency allows unseen donors to influence political debate. Donald Trump pleaded not guilty on Thursday to federal charges over his efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. Marking the third time this year, the ex-president has been forced to respond to a criminal indictment. Trump was arrested and arraigned on 4 felony counts outlined in Special Counsel Jack Smith's indictment: conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction of and attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, and conspiracy against rights. The arraignment came 2 days after Smith's office filed its indictment, accusing Trump of executing a criminal scheme to remain in office, even after it became clear he had fairly lost the 2020 presidential election to Joe Biden. Trump travelled from his Bedminster club in New Jersey to Washington on Thursday with his lawyers and several top aides to appear at the arraignment. He was formally arrested at the E. Barrett Prettyman Federal Courthouse, just blocks from the US Capitol, where the deadly January 6th insurrection unfolded. After entering his plea of not guilty, Trump was released on the conditions that he adhere to all federal, state and local laws and avoid discussing the case with any witnesses. The next hearing in the case has been set for the 28th of August. Returning to Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport after the arraignment, Trump denounced the indictment as a persecution of a political opponent, as he remains the frontrunner in the Republican presidential primary. Smith's 45-page indictment asserts that Trump and his associates disseminated lies, alleging widespread fraud in the 2020 election, while convening slates of fake electors in key battleground states. The indictment also listed 6 co-conspirators, who were not charged in the indictment. While they were unnamed, the descriptions of 5 of the 6 matched those of the Trump lawyers Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, John Eastman, Kenneth Chesebro, and as well as the former US Justice Department official Jeff Clark. According to Smith's indictment, Trump and his associates' relentless campaign of misinformation culminated in the insurrection, which claimed the lives of at least 7 people. The charges in Washington represent the second indictment filed by Smith, who previously charged Trump in June with retaining national security documents at his Mar-a-Lago club in Florida and obstructing the government's efforts to retrieve them. That case is currently scheduled to go to trial in May of 2024. Trump has also been indicted in an unrelated case by the Manhattan District Attorney, who charged him over hush money payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels before the 2016 election. He is expected to be indicted a fourth time in Georgia, where he may face racketeering charges over his election subversion efforts. The Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, is suing placebo frontman Brian Molko for defamation after publicly calling her racist and fascist, according to local media reports. Molko made the comments during a performance by the band at the Sonic Park Festival in Stupinigi, outside Turin, in July. Giorgia Meloni, piece of shit, fascist, racist, he appeared to shout in Italian in footage posted on social media by fans who attended the gig. Prosecutors opened an investigation against Molko for insulting the state institutions a week later. Italy has one of the highest rates of libel suits against the media in Europe, according to journalist associations. Roberto Saviano, the author of Gomorrah, is facing a trial for comments he made about Meloni over her stance on immigration. She sued him for criminal defamation, and a judge in Rome ruled that the writer should be tried. If convicted, Saviano faces up to 3 years in prison. Under Italy's criminal code, anyone who publicly defames the Republic, which includes the government, parliament, the courts, and the army, faces punishment of a fine of between €1,000 to €5,000. The International Press Institute has joined its Media Freedom Rapid Response partners in calling again on the Italian Parliament to undertake comprehensive overhaul of Italy's defamation laws that bring them in line with international standards on freedom of expression. A court in Russia has extended Alexei Navalny's prison sentence by 19 years and sentenced him to a special regime with the harshest prison conditions in the country. Navalny, 47, once led street protests against the Russian President Vladimir Putin, built a nationwide political opposition, and revealed salacious details of Kremlin officials' corrupt lifestyles. As revenge, Russia has sentenced him to a cumulative 3 decades in prison, a term that will most likely keep the Kremlin critic behind bars and out of politics for as long as Putin remains alive. Navalny attended the sentencing today, which was handed down in a closed hearing inside a penal colony auditorium in a black prison jumpsuit. Journalists and members of the public have been barred from attending the trial. He was found guilty on 6 counts, including inciting and financing extremism, creating an illegal NGO, the rehabilitation of Nazism, and inciting children to dangerous acts. He and his supporters have rejected the charges as being politically motivated. Navalny's trial was held behind closed doors at the IK6 penal colony in Melikovo, about 235 kilometers east of Moscow. State prosecutors had requested that Navalny get a further 20 years on the 6 criminal charges. In a closing statement at his trial, Navalny said, "For a new, free, rich country to be born, it must have parents, those who want it, who expect it, and who are willing to make sacrifices for its birth." Judge Andrei Suvorov said he had delivered a definitive penalty against Navalny, who he described as a recidivist in the ruling. The verdict sentenced Navalny to a special prison regime that will limit his ability to meet visitors or write or receive letters for years after his term begins. Navalny can only see his family once a year and receive 1 parcel each year, and will be forbidden from talking to fellow inmates. The conditions will further limit his ability to direct the opposition movement that he founded in Russia, and that he has been continued to try and manage from behind bars since being jailed in 2021. Russia has become far more repressive since it invaded Ukraine, with most of the country's high-profile opposition people either in prison or forced into exile. However, Navalny was always a special target. He was arrested in early 2021 after recovering from an attempted assassination by poison that has been tied to the FSB security service. He is also facing terrorism charges that could add decades more to his prison sentence. Projects across Scotland have been awarded funding as part of the Scottish Government's Digital Inclusion Programme, aimed at helping people to access online support services, initially in mental health and housing services. The 13 projects, which bid to be one of the digital pioneers, will develop, test, and implement programs to help people access the services they need online to support their health and well-being. The £600,000 first phase of the programme is being delivered in partnership with the Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations. It will benefit more than 1,500 people by building skills and confidence, as well as devices to support access to digital services in mental health and housing. It is expected that following the programme, which will run for 2 years, a shared understanding and learning of how best to support digital inclusion in mental health and housing will be created. Michael Matheson, MSP Cabinet Secretary for NHS Recovery, Health and Social Care, said, "Supporting people to feel more digitally confident so they can access the services they need online is absolutely vital, and it is one of our long-standing commitments. This programme will see models tested that will help so many people gain the skills they need to improve their own health and know how to access the support that is available to them." A new display at the National Museum of Scotland, uniquely Scottish silver, will showcase a range of objects highlighting Scottish designs and provide an insight into how people used them. The display will bring together 5 distinctively Scottish designs: mazers, quaiths, thistle cups, ovoid urns, and heart brooches. While some of these objects survive in plentiful numbers, others are amongst the earliest and rarest survivals within the Scottish silversmith's craft. Highlights of the display include thistle cups, which were a relatively short-lived phenomenon from the 1680s to 1720s, but a distinctively Scottish one, with their inverted bell shape and prominent lobes to the bottom half of the cup, giving the impression of a thistle head. These designs reveal that Scottish silversmiths were innovative in their work, and that they added their own twist to create a remarkably Scottish form of silverware. The display includes pieces from the 16th to the early 20th centuries, some of which were instantly recognisable as Scottish, including quaiths and heart brooches, as well as rarer items such as thistle cups and mazers. Only 9 Scottish mazers are known to survive. Also on display will be a futuristic-looking ovoid urn, which, thanks to some detective work by researchers, is now believed to have been used for serving coffee rather than tea, as had previously been thought. Lindsay McGill, curator of Renaissance and early modern Scottish history, said, "During the Renaissance and early modern period, about 1450 to 1750, Scottish craftsmen designed and produced a wealth of silver artefacts. While most designs were influenced by contemporary British and European fashions, the country's silversmiths also created a number of forms unique to Scotland, and that's what the display is about. These items were owned and used by people from many walks of life. Some objects were sentimental and held meaning, while others signified the latest styles." Of the 43 items in the display, Lindsay says that a particular favourite is a quaich made by William Scott in Aberdeen around 1681. It's a tiny quaich that fits in the palm of your hand and is engraved with parrots and flowers. Scott presumably took inspiration from pattern books or books on the natural world. It's a wonderful example of his delicate craftsmanship and creativity. It's quite beautiful, and I look forward to visitors getting the rare chance to see it. Uniquely Scottish Silver runs from the 5th of August 2023 until the 26th of May 2024, and admission is free. Well, that's it for this evening, but before I go, I just want to remind you that here at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. So to everyone who has donated, and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. Right now, we have a pressing need to raise £30,000 to pay our bills and ensure that we are able to continue making programmes. We have raised £10,500 thus far, but we really need your help to raise the remaining £19,500 as soon as possible. Good night, and thank you for watching.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.